Good morning, everyone. Today is Memorial Day, and Memorial Day is more than hot dogs and hamburgers and good sales. Memorial Day is a very significant and important day, and that is because many people, of course, died and gave their lives for this country and for our freedom. And not only did these young people die, but they died halfway across the world all alone, away from their family on some lonely battlefield somewhere, who knows where. And they gave everything up for us, and that puts a responsibility upon us. We're now in the days of the counting of the Omer, and it's interesting that we count the Omer right after Passover. Why do we count right after Passover? Of course, to get to Shavuot, but perhaps there's another message, that when God saves you from slavery, as He did by taking the Jews out of Egypt, that puts an onus, a responsibility on us to make sure that every one of our days count. Not just that we count them, but that we make them count, that they're accounted for. If you were so fortunate that God saved you from slavery, you have an extra burden or responsibility to God and to those who sacrificed for your freedom. And that's true as a Jewish people today. We live in the post-Holocaust generation. You know, Sorge Workin went away this Shabbos. Her grandmother celebrated with her 94th birthday. She was with us, if you remember, not long ago. And all her descendants came to Orlando to celebrate with her. And she has over 110 great-grandchildren. Wow. There are about 150 people in the photo. But what's shocking is that she came from Leningrad, and there were a family of 7 siblings. 5 of them perished, were killed by the communists. Only 2 survived, she and her brother. So if we're from the fortunate ones who survived the Holocaust or whatever Jewish history, persecution we survived, we have an accounting and a responsibility. And that's what Memorial Day reminds us as well as Americans. There are soldiers who died for our freedom. And the way we honor them is by acting honorable. Because what did they die for? That we should fight amongst ourselves and try to undermine each other? Or that we should live as proud Americans and live for the ideals and the values that they died for? And I want to tell you something fascinating. You know, when they fold a flag, sometimes you see the folding of the flag, there are 13 folds. And each fold has a symbolism. When the soldiers fold it, they're supposed to think about something else for each of the folds. And you can look this up, as I did on the internet. You know what the 11th fold represents? The Hebrew citizens of this country who worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the God of Israel, and King David and King Solomon, who established the state of Israel and the capital of Jerusalem. That's in our American tradition what the 11th fold represents, honors American citizens. Because Americans played a very integral role throughout our history in securing this country. You know, tomorrow night we're having an event about anti-Semitism at 7:30 at the shul to talk about anti-Semitism, which is growing by leaps and bounds. So many Americans don't realize what Jews did for this country. A matter of fact, if you take out any dollar bill, there's 2 circles on the back. If you look at the right-hand circle, which is pretty much the symbol of the seal of the United States, there are many, many details in it. And every detail, if you can look this up on the internet too, has a different message. Too long to elaborate right now. But on the top, there's 13 stars in a circle, in a little circle, representing the 13 colonies, the original colonies. But the 13 stars are arranged in the shape of a Magen David, a Star of David. And the reason was because there was a Jew by the name of Chaim Solomon who lived in the early 1700s. He immigrated from Poland. He was a wealthy financier. And he died a pauper because he gave all his money to help the American Revolution. And George Washington said to him, "How can I honor you?" And he said, "I don't want anything for myself, but I want something for the Jewish people. And I want you to put on every piece of currency the Star of David." And that's why till this day, every dollar in your pocket right now has a Magen David out of the 13 original colonies in the top right-hand corner. So Jews played a very integral role, but we forget our history. But thousands and hundreds of thousands of soldiers died so we could live freely in this blessed country, United States. And they are modern-day heroes. You want to see heroes? Go to Arlington Cemetery and look at the rows of white graves. Every one of those young people, 19, 20, 21, who died, or our veterans today who came back severely wounded, they are the modern heroes who gave us our freedom. And that is that we can't just have barbecues and hot dogs. We have to really have a responsibility. And the first thing is to live up to the values and ideals of America. It's a story about a man who was in a fire, this house was on fire, and a man walks by and he's yelling, "Help, help, the building's on fire." So this man runs into the burning building, runs upstairs, and he rescues this man. And as he goes to rescue this man, he's severely wounded and burnt himself. And afterwards, the one who was rescued said to the man who rescued him, "How could I ever repay you? I'm a very wealthy man. Name your price. You saved my life. I'll give you anything." And the man said, "I don't want any reward. I just did what was right." He said, "No, I insist on rewarding you. What can I do to reward you?" And the man who saved him said, "I'll tell you what you can do. Live a life that was worth saving." If our soldiers who died on this for us, that we're remembering today, will be able to say to us, what would they want from us as a reward for giving up their lives, making the ultimate sacrifice? They would say, just live a life worth saving, that our death should not have been in vain. And I'll tell you something that happened last week, true story. You can look this up on the internet too. In Chestnut Hill, Boston, there were some yeshiva boys taking a walk. And they went by a canal, and they saw a man floating in the water. He was drowning. And these yeshiva boys ran to a nearby police officer and alerted there's a man drowning in the canal. The officer called help, and they jumped in and they rescued this man. When they pulled the man out of the water, the officer saw that he had a swastika tattooed on his arm. And here these yeshiva boys with kippot and tzitzis saved his life, and they're pulling out a man with a swastika, a neo-Nazi. So the officer who rescued him went over to the yeshiva boys who were standing there and said, "You know, the guy we pulled out had a swastika on his hand. Do you regret saving his life?" And the yeshiva boys said, "No, we don't regret saving his life, but please tell him that it was yeshiva boys, Jewish boys, who were the ones who alerted the police to go save his life." And the message is sometimes we hate for no reason. And we don't realize that there are people who gave up their lives for us, not to hate, but to live a life of love, of goodness, of inspiration. And on a day like today, we should take a moment to think about that and do something honorable in our lives to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice, the heroes throughout American history.